there would be concern that getting kids back on campus in larger groups may result in an uptick in the COVID metrics. So to account for that, while at the same time providing kids with structured physical activities, we are giving them the opportunity to engage in these low-risk, sport-specific and conditioning workouts. We will stay in those workouts until really end of September, mid-September, end of September. We're looking 2 to 3 weeks into school. Our plan from the onset, that when we approved it on July 30th, had kids in low-risk activities through September 11th, which at that time we felt would be representative of about 2 weeks of data for the majority of our schools. Most of our schools were going back to campus the week of August 31st, October 1st, sometime around that time frame. We've seen that the start date for a lot of our schools have moved to just after Labor Day, to September 8th. So again, accounting for that, we pushed that time frame where full teams would get together and you would be in positions where you're outside of those small cohorts. We agree and we believe that shouldn't happen until at least 2 weeks after, and the standard I think has been 2 weeks of data to look at any change in COVID metrics. So we want to meet that standard and put that date off as the earliest possible date to be September 20th. Again, as we evaluate and we look at these on a weekly basis, there could be decisions each week that either the metrics support moving forward to the next level of play, whether that's full team or increase to moderate risk activity and then eventually increase to potentially high risk. The metrics could say that it doesn't support moving in that direction, or it could look at and it could be decided that more data is necessary before we make a decision to move in any direction. And we've been consistent in looking at that since March. When we started this process and we had to face the decision of whether to cancel or not cancel winter sports, this is the process we used. We used the same process in the spring. We used the same process when we returned to conditioning on July 6th, and we've used the same process as we've moved forward with that conditioning and we enter into the fall sports season. So, you know, again, we want very clear our message to be that we are listening to the recommendations that are coming from the Department of Health. We are aligning in many ways with the recommendations of the Department of Health. We still have some questions and we still have some areas that we feel that need to be explored as we go forward. And as we do that, we are aligning with those recommendations until we can get that further clarification and information and make sure that we're all on the same page. In doing so, we're trying to provide our districts and our superintendents with as much direction as possible for them to be able to know what is in the best interest of their particular kids in their region to engage their students. Particular, again, with football and volleyball, these are areas where we begin in the low risk, and as we're making that decision and continuing our conversations with DPH, some things that we would like to understand is if the metrics when we get back to school continue to be in a positive place where they are right now, can we make the decision at that time as we move forward to play 11v11 football, which is what we would like to see our kids have the experience to participate in. Football, unlike any other sport that we have in Connecticut, is unique that there's not really that club or AAU experience for kids. The opportunity that they have to perform in 11v11, the recruiting processes for colleges, those opportunities to be seen really are still confined to the high school sports season. And so if we can give the kids that opportunity for that experience, more than any other sport, this may be the only opportunity that we have. And if we could provide that now when the metrics are good and would suggest supporting that, that's when we feel the best opportunity may be. As we move into the winter and the spring, it's anticipated that there will be an uptick in the COVID metrics, because as we move indoors, what our medical experts and what we've heard from DPH and talking with their medical people is, it is anticipated that when you get larger groups indoors, that it's likely that you may see an uptick. So we understand that, and when we look at that, it may very likely be that the numbers throughout the course of the winter and into the spring of the school year will never be as good as they are right now. So now may be the only opportunity to provide kids the experience. So what we're doing in our plan is we are looking at time. We are given the time for our kids to get back on campus under low-risk activities, and then take a very deliberate look to see if there is any impact to the COVID metrics. And at that point, we'll decide whether it's appropriate or not to move to moderate risk activities and then high risk activities. In doing so, we do feel we align with DPH's recommendations right now, and we do feel we can continue the conversations and come into alignment or a joint position with them, hopefully, down the road as we continue these conversations of what is appropriate for our kids, based not only on our qualitative expectations of what may happen, but also on the quantitative data of what our metrics show at this time. The other benefit that we see for that kids is just the mental health, the social emotional well-being of our kids. We know that structured physical activity is more than just preparing for a game. When we give kids structured experiences, we can keep them more safe than if we send them out on their own to participate. We are able to engage them in meaningful relationships with coaches, with peers. It has a significant value to them beyond wins and losses on a field. And as much as possible, we want to engage our kids in those experiences. Again, when we think about graduations coming back, right, there was a thought that in increasing graduations to the size of 150, you may see an uptick in metrics. And our understanding is that the small uptick that was seen during that time frame was traced back to private parties. So when we think about the actual event of graduation on school campuses that was regulated by schools, we saw a very safe experience that was provided by all. When we look at the experiences since July 6th, we've provided for training for kids. It's been a very safe experiences. When we stopped the activities over the past couple weeks, I can't tell you the number of pictures and videos that were sent to me to say, look at what's happening on this field. There's last Sunday, got an email, a text message with a picture of about 20 kids out on a field playing football with each other. And again, our point is, if our coaches are with our kids and they're motivating and encouraging them, now listen, we have an opportunity to play together, but to do that, you have to commit to school, your family, and this team, and you have to forego those social experiences where you're getting together in these unstructured environments, because that is where the risk is more likely that you're going to be in a position that you're not being screened, where you may be exposed. If we can commit to those, we can motivate our kids, we believe, to adhere more closely to those mitigating strategies that will keep our kids safe. Also, in working in the cohorts of 10 for the time from Saturday all the way to September 20th in those cohorts, we also feel that aligns directly with the efforts of our schools. So if you're in a hybrid model of learning and you have, say, half of the school, the first half of the alphabet in on Mondays and Tuesdays, the second half of the alphabet in on Wednesdays and Thursdays, well, the cohort of 10 that you designed for athletics could align with those cohorts, right? So you could have a cohort that has athletes with only the first half of the alphabet, only the second half of the alphabet. So you're not intermixing any of those cohorts from an educational setting or from an athletic setting. And again, we're providing them that structured activity that they need from a social, emotional, mental, physical health standpoint that would, we believe, make them less likely to go out and then intermingle those cohorts, whether they're engaging in club activities, AAU activities, or just on their own in general. So that's the value that we see beyond the sports season that we're providing as well. The final piece that I think we see in the update that we give as well is a direct tie-in and correlation to what the State Department of Education and Public Health has issued as the metrics of suggesting what's appropriate in terms of in-person learning, hybrid learning, and distance learning. So the primary metric of looking at the percentage of cases per 100,000, where I think if it's 10 or less, that it's suggested that in-person learning is appropriate full in-person. If it's between that 10 and 25 number, that the hybrid model would be the recommended model, and then if it's over 25, that a distance learning model would be recommended. So again, from our perspective, if we're in that yellow section, that 10 or less, we believe at that point it's appropriate to move forward with some level of sport experience for kids that includes those games and those competitions. If we get to a level that is that orange level, that hybrid level, where only hybrid is allowed, then at that level, we believe that your activities should be restricted to low-risk, small cohort, on-campus activities. Again, we believe in the value of participation, but we also believe that our primary goal is for kids to be on campus and learning. So if we're at that level that only hybrid is encouraged, you can maintain those educational cohorts in the athletic setting, provide that structured activity, which again we think will help keep kids motivated to maintain the integrity of those cohorts beyond the classroom and beyond the school. We would permit that for districts to choose to allow to still engage in at that time. If it goes to that red level, that distance learning level, if we are at a COVID metric that learning is not advisable on campus, then we would stop sport activity at that time. Okay, so those are, we put that in there as well. The other piece that we think about very seriously as well is not only the decisions we're making right now and how that impacts kids, but how do the decisions we make now impact the future. And if we were to say, looking at the metrics right now, under the best of circumstances, that we can't support and play indoor moderate risk sports now, or we can't play outdoor high risk sports now, then we're making the statement that in the winter, we can't play indoor moderate risk sports. And if we can't play outdoor high risk sports, we certainly can't play indoor high risk sports. When we look towards the winter, basketball, hockey, I think those two are high risk on the categories. Swimming would be low risk. Indoor track, the track action itself would be low risk, but because of the number of participants that you would have in an area, would increase that to a moderate risk type activity. Gymnastics, again, because of the sharing of equipment, because of the number of the people, that would be kind of in that low risk, moderate risk activity, but again, with all the sharing of equipment and sanitizing, that would go into it, that would elevate that level. So if we were to make that decision right now to say, we can't play those sports under the metrics that we have in Connecticut at this time, we would be making that decision moving essentially through our winter season. And we believe our kids, our athletes, and our schools deserve the value of time and deserve the opportunity to at least begin under low-risk activities and then assess as we move forward. We think it's safe, we think it's logical, we think it gives a progression, we think it addresses the social, emotional, mental health needs of our kids, as well as their desire to compete, and gives direct information to our superintendents and our boards that they need to proceed and make the decision that's best for them. And as we move forward to the winter, again, at least preserves the opportunity to see where the metrics are at that time and whether or not it's appropriate to play. And that is the hope, that is the goal that we're working towards, and how we want to support our kids as we move forward to give them the very best opportunities that we can under the most challenging circumstances that they've experienced, as have we. I appreciate the opportunity to share our rationales and our thinking. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Yeah, Glenn, if the DPH, if the Department of Health, does not revise its recommendations at a certain time frame, what would that time frame be? And I guess the 21st or maybe even October 1st. What will the CIAC do then? Are they compelled to follow what the DPH said?
Yeah, Sean, good question. So one of the next steps that we're taking is we're going to be reaching out to our football coaches and asking, what is the minimum number of games that you would see as a value that we would be interested in playing? So I think most of our coaches would say you probably need about at least 2 weeks of time, thinking about 5 weeks of acclimatization, and then at least another week of hitting in contact. Most coaches would like to have a scrimmage in there. So you're probably looking 2 to 3 weeks in terms of a time frame to prepare a football team to get on the field for a game, right? So if we were to move backwards from the end of the season and say, okay, so if November 21st was the last opportunity to play, and then we come back 3 weeks from there, we're looking at about October 30th, I think, at that point. So if we use that rationale and you started on October 30th, you could play 1 game, right? So if our coaches felt 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, whatever that meaningful experience would be, that is what would establish kind of the end date that we would say, okay, by this point, we have to make a determination of whether or not the metrics will support 11v11 to actually be played in the fall. And then at the same time, simultaneously, while we're doing that, we're working with coaches to develop meaningful low risk and moderate risk experiences for kids that we can engage them in along the way to, again, give the kids the best experiences possible. But we'll be working on establishing what that drop dead decision date is with coaches over the next week or so.
Are you guys compelled to follow the DPH's final recommendation?
Well, I think that's where one of the challenges with the inconsistency exists. So again, within our membership, we have public schools, but we also have private schools, right? So I believe our public schools would be compelled to follow a recommendation that comes from DPH. But our private schools would really fall under those private sector rules. So if we have a recommendation from DPH for a part of our membership that is, that 11v11 football isn't recommended, but then we have private sector rules that say high-risk sports are permitted to play, even within our member schools, we have a contradiction of, kind of recommendations for them to follow. So we'd like, as much as we can, to have conversations and close the gap between those inconsistencies and understanding from DPH, is there a quantitative piece that supports the qualitative rationale, that for schools, it makes sense to not play high risk, which again, we agree with right now as you start. As you start, it doesn't make sense to play high risk. As you start, we agree it doesn't make sense to play moderate risk. As you start school, low risk is in small cohorts is all that is advisable, because we want kids back on campus just as they do to see if there's any, any type of movement in the metrics one way or the other. So if we can't close that gap, I think our public schools would probably be in a position where they would likely need to follow whatever the DPH recommendation is. And again, as we get closer and we have those conversations, if there's no movement there, I think it's likely that that's the direction this will, probably flow. But again, hopefully with getting, I think the value of getting their doctors together with our doctors was the understanding that came out of that, of where the sport-specific conversations and the needs of our kids meet with the general overall, kind of global thinking of preventative measures as well.
So the DPH recommended the 7-on-7 football, outdoor volleyball. How seriously was that considered or tossed around CIAC?
It's still being considered, very much. And again, when DPH, make those recommendations. I think they kind of put it in a category to say, consider modifications that would lower the risk of those sports, such as, so I didn't take it as they were just saying, 7v7 is all you can do, or outdoor volleyball is all you can do. I think they were using those as examples of things ways to explore lower risk. So again, in football, we would like to play 11v11 if the metrics support it. But as we move forward, Sean, we're going to continue to explore meaningful moderate risk and low risk activities for football players, just as we are for our other sports. Because if the metrics don't get us to that point after school has started, we want to be prepared to still engage our kids in meaningful experiences. On the volleyball side, we explored the outdoor option pretty significantly at this point, and it doesn't appear that outdoor volleyball for us will be a viable option. And the things that are prohibiting that right now, after talking with coaches and the volleyball committee, very few of our schools right now have any sort of outdoor setup. So the safety aspect of having standards for outdoors that you're not concerned about, moving, falling, creating a risk for athletes in a highly competitive situation, not just kind of a rec, outdoor gym type of scenario, raised a lot of concerns. Equity of availability of fields, as well as equity of resources to keep the grass of a field cut to the level that it would need to be able to line fields to have outdoor courts. That equity of resources was a significant issue in terms of being able to provide that across schools. And then another piece that really, kind of rang out, and that is our more elite players in volleyball, who are those, again, when you look at considering that probably, about 4% to 6% of our kids go on to play at the college level. Those really elite level of players, while the private sector rules allow for indoor volleyball to be played right now, and they are playing it right now, those elite players would just go play that club and play indoors and play under those, optimal conditions to be seen and engage in that experience, rather than playing outdoors in that experience. So all those factors combined, led us to the piece that, okay, outdoor volleyball for Connecticut, especially as you get into October, late October, November, just wasn't a viable option. So we're looking at other things like, what is the potential of playing with a mask? So we'll be talking with our medical advisors and seeing, is there, recommendations on masks and things that we could wear. What we understand from DPH is the concern with volleyball isn't necessarily about the closeness of contact. It's that in the indoor space, as you're yelling instructions and communicating with each other on court, it's the forceful nature of the communication and the spread of the air droplets in that scenario. So, we may be looking at scenarios like that, like if you wear a mask, does that address the concern? Does that mitigate the risk? And see if those are possibilities.
You mentioned the inconsistencies and what the private sector is allowed to do. If, perchance, the rules committee came back and said, you know what, you're right, maybe we shouldn't be allowing the private sector to do basketball, hockey, football, whatever it is, would that all change what you guys are offering?
Certainly, it would be new information that, again, we would look at and see, and if the thought is, that across Connecticut, the best thing for us to do as we enter back into a scenario of schools getting back on campus and coming indoors, that it's not advisable to have, high-risk activities or moderate-risk indoor activities across the state. That, to me, is pretty clear and consistent, and that's a position that, we certainly can get on board with and abide with. But as I said, right now, with it being inconsistent, it's not only inconsistent with the state, it's inconsistent within our own membership. So that's why we just see it as a piece that we need to continue to talk more about. And DPH, in their letter to us this past Sunday, indicated that, those are still conversations that are ongoing internally, and that they would be in touch with us in the next few days. So again, I get the sense from DPH that they intend on continuing that conversation with us as well. And again, they've been very good conversations with DPH. There's no, there's no animosity between CIAC and DPH. I don't see us as being defiant from DPH. We're actually abiding by, kind of their recommendations right now. What we're just asking for is the benefit of time to look before, we make decisions that we know are going to have a negative impact on kids. Let's move in the direction of trying to give them as much as we can until the point that COVID tells us we can't.
When did you guys, what contact did you have with the Department of Health when submitting this updated fall sports plan? I mean, did you have them sign off on it? Did you say you were doing this? Did you give them that opportunity, and what did they say?
Yeah, no, I mean, and there's been no sign off along the way in terms of plans from DPH. It's always been communication and recommendations from them. And same thing, with the rules committee when we meet. It's just kind of, we review, we take feedback from them. So it's not a scenario where DPH is signing off on the plan. They're reviewing our plan, and then they're giving recommendations on that based on what they see and what they feel based on their conversation. So, right now, they reviewed it. Again, I think we could say that we're fairly closely aligned, if not precisely aligned, in everything except football and volleyball right now. And even in football and volleyball, while we recognize and understand their concerns, and have begun those activities in a low risk category. So when you think of their recommendation to explore methods that reduce the risk from high risk and indoor moderate risk in volleyball and football, what we have put in place as activities that our kids are participating in through the first 3 weeks of school is that recommendation that we have reduced that to low risk in those sports as well.
Glenn, have any of the schools who canceled fall sports jumped back in?
Joe, I haven't heard that yet, but I do think that there may be discussions on that as we move forward. So we'll see where school districts go with that. But again, from our standpoint, we're going to stand by and support any decision that a superintendent in a school district makes that's in the best interest of their kids. And if they don't feel, again, another thing that we said. Fluid was is our first. Our second is that when the time is right, we're going to play again. Well, that time being right may be different for people in various parts of the state, might be different by individual community, and might be different by individual people. A district may decide to play, but a parent may decide and a kid may decide not to. And when we're dealing with COVID, we just have to mutually respect everybody's position on that. And from our standpoint, we feel it's our responsibility to let people know where we feel competition is safe and opportunities are safe to engage, and then allow them to make that decision.
So what do you say to kids then? I mean, we're looking at New Haven right now in an inner city school district who then might have to watch their suburban neighbors get the chance to play. What do you say to those kids?
Yeah, Gabby, with those kids, we recognize where that is right now, and again, we'd like to try to offer and talk to those cities as well to say, what are the opportunities that we can offer kids? How can we get them onto a field? How can we get them into a structured experience? Because even in those areas right now where a decision has been made to go to a distance learning format, from the metrics that exist in Connecticut, the decision isn't to go to distance learning, it would appear right now, because it's unsafe to be there. The decision appears to be right now based on size of school, availability of resources, how you can, kind of cohort or, work with smaller groups. That seems to be more the driving factors in schools that are deciding to go distance learning at this time. For those kids, again, we have to think about what are they doing when they're not engaged in the learning. We don't think that those kids are just staying home. We think that those kids are going to do something. And if we can engage those kids in small cohort activities with their coach, where they're screened on a daily basis, maybe you pick up symptoms in somebody that you can have them, seek and get attention, that identifies somebody who may have COVID that otherwise wouldn't. If you have kids that are healthy and you have them in those structured activities and you provide that outlet, that peer relationship, that coach relationship, that mentorship opportunity, whether they ever compete in a game this season or not, still holds extreme value for these kids' mental, social, emotional, physical, and cognitive well-being. So, with those districts, again, we respect whatever decision you make, but we also want to work with you to understand how can we provide meaningful experiences through sport for those kids, even if they're not going to get on, the field and compete. There may be still things that we can do that give them the value and the benefits of structured activity.
Well, and it doesn't sound like you're any closer to actually playing football at this point. You're still saying it's a wait and see type of situation once everybody's back, right? We're not saying today, yes, you're gonna play football.
We have set October 1st as the start date for all sports. So today, we are a day closer to starting practice in conditioning and non-contact sport-specific activities in every sport. And we are no closer to playing games in any sport than that. Again, we have to stay fluid. We have to see where the metrics are. If today were October 1st, the metrics would look pretty good to play games, right? But it's not, right? So when we get to those dates, that will determine whether or not it's safe to play not only football, but that's going to determine if it's safe to play soccer, play field hockey. We have to remain fluid. We have to remain vigilant and looking at these numbers on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis for kids. So that's not specific. It's not just football. That's in every sport right now is in the same category.
Glenn, I coach football in the state. The kids were fired up when they heard this, right? But today we're hearing kind of the same uncertainty. And I know that kids appreciate the word time, right? Giving you and everybody enough time to say that we can't play. And I just use football for every kid,
Sure.
every sport. What do you say to those kids? Because the more time it takes, right, to make a decision, the less time there is to actually get the season underway. How do you put a perspective on that for kids at all sports? It doesn't just have to be football.
Absolutely. And so again, Coach, right now, we have to look at what are the best opportunities we can provide kids today. That best opportunity we can provide kids today is what we're doing, all sports, football included, right? Conditioning, low risk. We've established that. As we move forward, right, that is what the experience of COVID has been. We have to see how we progress, and over that time, we have to understand how have the metrics changed or not changed to allow us to take that next step in opening, okay? And sports is no different than I think where we are in every aspect of our lives with this. I know, you think about just from a state perspective, moving from phase 2 to phase 3, right? These are important decisions that the element of time and understanding when is the appropriate time to do that, what do the metrics say, how do you decide to take that step and allow that opportunity for our kids? I would say sports is the same way, okay? Right now, we want you to get with your coaches and your teams in the safest opportunity that we could, and that's what we're providing. And enjoy the moments. Enjoy everything you have right now. Because we learned that in March, right? On March 9th, we played. On March 10th, we couldn't play anymore, right? And then we couldn't play through the spring. Nobody knew when we headed into this, in March or April, that we wouldn't be back on campuses in the spring. You have to enjoy the moments that you have with each other, the experiences that you had. And to our kids, I would say the same thing. Don't let your thoughts of what may or may not happen tomorrow diminish the experience that you're having today. Enjoy those moments with your coaches, with your peers, with your friends, playing a sport that you love today, and know that we're going to do the best we can to provide you every opportunity, if it is safe, to engage in the sports that you love.
Glenn, at this point, would you say it's fair to say we're going to try to play as many sports as we can, but at no point during the season is it going to be a concrete you're playing?
Yeah, Kai, I would say that has been our message from day one. Again, it's fluid, it's day to day. We assess every day. We assess on a weekly basis. Again, for every sport, and I think Danbury's a good example right now, right? So, Danbury's example where things were going well, there's an uptick in the community, and so schools had to go to distance learning, and sports have stopped for a period of time, right? But 2 days before that, sports were fine, right? So that's just the nature of COVID, and that's one of the things that, again, I think the frustration should not be with DPH. The frustration, shouldn't be with, the frustration is just that COVID dictates that on a day-to-day basis, we have to evaluate and see what is possible and safe for our kids to do. So again, it's not unique to volleyball or football. As you said, it's all sports. And that's why, again, going back to your question, Coach, you have to encourage the kids, enjoy the moment you have today and you're playing today. Because that's all that we can guarantee you. That's all anybody can guarantee you with COVID is what the experience is we have right now.
Glenn, are you asking athletes, coaches to sign waivers that it's going to be okay for them with no legal repercussions if they come down with COVID?
Nothing, Joe, beyond what they normally sign to participate in sports.
The DPH's, their recommendations, as I read them, they're concerned about the spread when school returns. That's been their big thing. Like they, compared to summer sports, they don't know what schools are going to look like. Some are hybrid, some are not. So but a lot of people are arguing that summer provided the best context and said there was no. Is that how concerned are you guys about that? What have you seen in that regard about schools reopening and having kids back in a population?
Yeah. We share that qualitative concern that when you put high concentrations of people together indoors, that there certainly is a greater potential for spread. So that is something that we want to, again, provide the time to assess. And that's why from our plan from the onset to where it is now, had kids in school for a 2-week period of time before we considered any full team type of experiences, right? So that has just shifted back because the start date of schools have shifted back. So we recognize their concern from that qualitative perspective, and we share it. Where we're trying to get on the same page is the quantitative data that our medical experts and that we've been talking to look at, would ask, when you look at that primary factor, right, of the percent of cases per 100,000, it's still remarkably low in Connecticut. Even as the cases in younger demographics may be increasing, that overall percent by county is extremely low. When you look at hospitalizations and you look at deaths, that still stays, and again, recognizing one death is too many, it's still, that number still stays very low, which would, may suggest that either the younger demographic who may be getting it either handles it better, or the medical treatment is advanced where they know how to treat it better, or a combination of both. And that's why as we progress and we mutually agree, yes, we need time because it is a concern that as we get indoors in groups that it may increase. But we want to make sure that we're looking at the same quantitative measures that DPH is looking at to assess whether or not that qualitative concern has actually happened, or as we've seen with return to sports in June and July, that concern didn't play out.
How much are you guys looking at both sides, looking at other states? Other states have opened up in the fall. How much of a factor is that in your, I hate to say that, you're looking at kids in petri dishes over in the other states, but, how much of a factor is that in there? Because they are doing it, and what can you find, what have you found so far? It's only been a couple weeks, so.
Right, yeah, exactly, Sean. Not only have we had some states now that have played football, but there were some states whose, for example, Iowa, their regular sports season for baseball and softball is the summer. So they played their state association season during their normal time, which was the summer. So that was a piece to look at, specific schools playing there as well. And then, as you said, there's a number of states playing football right now. So, what we've seen so far is that there have been cases where schools, 1 or 2 kids or 3 kids on a team may have come down, with COVID, where there's been a 2-week kind of isolation for a team where they couldn't play. But we haven't seen anything yet, or I haven't heard anything yet, whether from those summer experiences or those teams, those states already playing fall sports right now, where the result has been that an entire, sports season or specific sport would have to shut down. But as you said, it's relatively young. Again, when you think about, I think the standard really is about 2 weeks of kind of understanding, is there an impact to the metrics? So we're still kind of in the early stages of even those state associations getting back. But again, the value of time. 3 weeks from now, they're going to be in the middle of their seasons, and we're going to just be at the potential of starting ours. And that's going to be valuable data for us to look at.
Glenn, the DPH has made its recommendations, volleyball, football, no. If the data is still low, if it's good for you guys come October 1st, is the CIAC prepared to go against what the DPH is recommending and go forward with volleyball, football?
Yeah, so I'm not reading it as DPH has said no volleyball or no football. I'm understanding DPH's recommendations of no volleyball and football as normal, consider ways to mitigate the risk to a lower level, that you could safely play those sports under their recommendations. So, I just want to make sure, for the public that, that they understand that's our kind of read of that right now as well. And again, our intent as we move forward is to find that common position with DPH on this, and I'm confident we will. I think again we need to continue the discussions that we're having. They're very good discussions. We recognize as well, DPH has a lot of things on their plate right now beyond sports. So those conversations may take a little bit longer than maybe some people would hope that answers would come. But again, we have to be respectful of the many things that DPH is dealing with right now as well. But I'm hopeful over the next couple of weeks. I said if we can come to that understanding of let's just see where we are, push it off, and let's not close the door on these experiences because the metrics do support right now trying. Understanding, as Sean said, the risk of DPH's position that bringing kids together, there's that concern. We share that concern as well. So I'm fairly confident that I think we'll come to that position together, just as we have to start conditioning, to start low risk non-contact activities. We share the same position to start soccer, field hockey, swimming, cross country 2 weeks after school. We're on the same page with all those. And so, that we have come to those mutual agreements. I'm confident we can get there in football and volleyball as well.
Glenn, to your point earlier, you said, kids, if there are any sports, will find a way, right, to play. We've seen at least 3 or 4 or 5 big name players head to another state to play. What's your reaction, to that?
Yeah, and I think the states they're heading to don't have the metrics we do. And, so again, it's part of our point, Coach, too, where, again, we respect the position that, we should wait until we have schools back on campus to read this, right? There's a reason that Connecticut's metrics are as good as they are, because, through the leadership of DPH, our governor's office, things have been put in place that have brought us to that point. And so we share that, we can't, recklessly, risk that by just going and putting groups, full in play. So we recognize we need to have that time frame of a couple weeks, see the data, and again, at that point, the decision we need more data. We have to be intentional and deliberate with the decisions we make to keep Connecticut's metrics low and get our kids on campus. So, yeah, it's disappointing to see kids make the choice that they need to go somewhere else for that athletic experience, and I'm sure that's not an easy choice. You think about the friends they're leaving behind, the decisions that they're making there. So it's a difficult choice they're making. We would prefer to see them, stay here and play. But again, in this environment, you just have to be respectful of the individual choices that people make, and, and from that, do the best we can to provide kids experiences.
Glenn, the metrics for going forward, will your decision be based on the entire state's metrics or a much smaller group of the high school metrics?
Yeah, Joe, I think you have to look at it in multiple ways. So again, you have the primary factor and then the tertiary factors that are represented in the State Department of Education and DPH model that is put out there, and that includes looking at things from a county perspective as well as narrowing it down to an individual school, right? So again, just using the case of Danbury where you are right now, so the county numbers for Danbury are fine. For Fairfield County are fine, right? But the numbers specific to Danbury may not be the same as, as what the average in the county is. So you have to dig down a little bit deeper to individual schools in that as well. And again, our member schools, as they're heading back to learning, they're not taking any risks as this year. Our superintendents, our principals, our teachers have been extremely diligent in thinking about the process and going back. And so, if numbers are going up there, we're confident they're going to communicate with us in individual scenarios, and be able to address that. I said both from a more statewide, county, and then down to individual district level.
Glenn, when you guys were putting together the fall plan, you released it July 30th. Had you talked to the DPH at that time?
Yes. The fall plan that we released on July 30th, on July 24th, we presented that plan for review to the Connecticut Rules Committee. There were members of DPH that sat on that committee. We did reach out to DPH specific to the fall sports plan as early as July 10th. We heard back from them specifically with a person who could talk directly with us on July 27th. We set up a meeting on July 28th. We spoke with that individual from DPH as well as an infectious disease MD with DPH as well. And at that time, actually on the 28th, was the first time that we specifically asked the question, what is your position on youth Pop Warner and high school football? And again, at the time, based on where we were and looking at metrics, again, we're sure there's always concern with high-risk sports, that there's a higher risk of transmission, understood. But at that time, the metrics in Connecticut and what was taking place would not prohibit high-risk sports from playing. So again, football being, the only high-risk sport, we remained in communication with them. I had communications August 9th, August 10th, August 12th, and then the letter from DPH on August 13th. So again, yes, we've been speaking with them, along the way. And again, opinions change and things change, and they change for good reason and good rationale. And that's why we just need to keep those lines of communication open, and as they have been, and we'll continue to collaborate with DPH as we move forward.